So just to preface this, do you work for the government? No. Did you work for the government? Prove it. How can we validate this in any capacity? You can't. X being a shithole is the main reason I post, because it is oddly cathartic to get the shit out of my head and off of my back. Anyways, Union Glacier Camp has a series of underground tunnels leading to the pyramid. In some leaked photos, you can see something like a port around the pyramid, but no landed planes or vehicles. That port is used for ATVs when they're doing something to the outside of the pyramid. I don't know what. I assume soil and rock samples, but it has always looked like local Antarctic stone to me. I've never seen the quarry. I'm sure it's buried underneath the shelf. This is your basic defense installation, straight concrete tunnels, flanked by indicator lights the entire way down, security cameras and bulkhead doors every 5,000 feet or so. Leads to a staircase into the pyramid, but more on that later. So there is a secondary military installation on Antarctica, obscured by Google Maps, at the request of the powers that be. Can't allude to further, and that's where I may have been most of the time. If you've heard the whole, wow, wireless and mobile devices existed since the 70s, it just wasn't cost effective, then you'll get the gist of this. The entire base is not cost effective and is about 30 years ahead of current technological field deployment. Next stage drones, predictive virtual intelligence, uploaded the black boxes of most field drones and fed their logistics, data, and operator interaction and mapped a dummy brain to it, letting it think enough to fulfill its job with minimal operator input, are on hand, but never left standby when I was there. Not sure about lately. Price isn't an object, so send batteries, law. And the radar they have can track a penguin fart from 100 miles away and tell you how it smells, so I can continue. At the military installation, we may have focused specifically on advanced robotics. Money can make any of the outside issues disappear. Our response time was good enough that we could put a drone and a missile up the ass of any individual coming from any direction on the continent. We never wanted debris or contact on the land, so if it did occur, they put you in the ocean and let God sort out the rest. The robotics were created for the pyramid itself, which I will get into. There's a lot of moving pieces here, so I'll stick to what I know, and if I drop terms absent-mindedly, just tell me, and I will circle back around. So, a bit of background on myself. I study robotics and kinesiology, specifically development of prosthetic limbs and adaptive technology for ease of life. I was more of an altruist before this, but was recruited into a program to develop this understanding of robotic and human interaction. My dream, way back in the day, was full integration of prosthetics. So, they put me on drone work at the installation. I dealt with repairs to the drones, decryption of data, and re-encrypted transmission of data out of our neck of the woods and to the researchers. I got a smattering of information from the pyramids, but not as much as someone in them. The drones would sometimes come back heavily damaged, in which we would have to salvage what we could, or completely contaminated, requiring us to get into its black box in full hazmat suits and try to figure out what the fuck happened when they weren't telling us the hows or whys. The team is, of course, heavily monitored. Every aspect of our work is heavily monitored, so I couldn't dissect any of the data as much as I wanted to without something happening. You can interpret that however you want to. I have been on X for a while and seen a lot of Antarctica threads, but the one that was closest was about the drunk old man talking to his Freemason buddy about what is inside the pyramids. Did you see the Fitbit global map that had the US government freaking out because it was revealing the locations of unknown military installations? It showed a huge one in Antarctica that was hidden in Google Maps. Using that as a jumping off point, most of the footage from the drones was them rolling through halls and taking photos of the drawings or words on them. The written language isn't one I ever saw before, and one that I never understood. There was a flow to it, but it lapsed from logical letters into a sharp, elegant script, and sometimes hieroglyphics, all on the same chunk of wall. The photos I saw were depictions of the people involved with the pyramid, or port of Antarctica, before whatever happened. Intermission, but I saw this and laughed. I did not hear about this, but it does not surprise me. When I was rotating out, they had a bunch of younger Greens and SEALs on security patrol, stationed in the giant tunnel, or around the installation to keep us in line, and they were dumber than a sack of shit. Just could not help themselves. It is fuck boring if you're not involved. So, the drawings on the walls would oftentimes show the people that ran the pyramid, or so I assume, and they were human, but giants. They recorded all of their history on every inch of this motherfucker, because they obviously understood that things can be lost to cataclysm. No paper, no real material, just hidden things and shit on the walls. The specific area I want to touch on is their conveying of medical information. They went into a great amount of detail on the heart and believe that the soul may have resided within. Assumption: they depict the heart with an orb in the center, some sort of stone that the heart grew around. They focused on the tissue, on the flow of blood, and how it regulated their bodies. Like I said before, it was hard to understand, but the heart that I saw was beautiful. Multiple valves, multiple chambers. The tissue it must have been made out of to be so efficient stunned me. I'm cobbling a lot of this together right now, but they had a huge growth cycle. I don't have enough space to go further. Continued. Press satellite view to see it better. It's right above the pyramid. The map they have now is edited. They have islands apparently, charted with routes, but nearby islands, which would be visited, are dark. Their growth cycle was depicted in photos, obviously. During infant, toddler, and child years, human standard of like 0 to 8, they could pass for human. They tend to be sickly, so the mothers would care for them daily. I believe this is because their systems were still developing and turning them into whatever they became. This actually makes me think that this isn't a natural or influenced evolution. When they get out of their child years, they begin to grow rapidly in their puberty phase. Their bones begin to reinforce and grow. The rib cage begins to open up and allow for greater lung capacity and strength. There was an image that depicted a rib cage opening somewhat. The floating ribs expanded out. The sternum was probably the size of a baseball bat and 4 times as wide. At this phase, they became healthier, but still didn't work, and instead became stronger. Actual applied lifestyle training regimens and organization within the group. Women tended to assume just a mother role and didn't branch out further from that, but had a different development. They have 3 extra muscles in their arms. God honest truth, I have no idea what for. It has to be in the text, but I just can't figure it out. History and anatomy of these people aside, the further you get into the pyramid, the worse it gets. It changes from this history of these people to what can only be religious allegory or predictions of cataclysm. It seems to me they had a concept similar to the Vikings, great winters and snowfall, extinguishing life, and all that shit. Is this what happened to the Antarctic? Fuck if I know. I won't and can't know at this point. There was one drone that I was fond of because I had built him out of reclaimed parts and was working with the virtual intelligence that I had spoken about before. I wanted to give him some sort of sentience, and I may have for a bit. He got sent back in. Fuck. Continued, but I am stopping soon. I'm hungry. So, my pet drone went back into the pyramid and made it to the 2nd level. This isn't anything exciting, because this is where the religious imagery and cataclysm content begin. It's a small staircase leading deeper underground. He had a homebrew virtual intelligence, mostly drone, but with more operator influence and the inability to blow things away. Everyone on the base received an encoded email from it about 18 hours after it went dark. It sent everyone sorry 100 times in an email, all in binary. I had to Google the binary again, so take it as you will, but imagine an Outlook email body that just includes this string of numbers, over and over again. I remained in my quarters with a personal mental recovery day, waiting for them to start knocking on my door and asking me why this happened. I may have thrown up 3 or 4 times, but after a while, it was just dry heaving. Never happened, never spoken about, and by noon, someone had gotten onto the server and purged it from everyone's box, everywhere, forever. At the end of my rotation, I was approached by the biology team, easier than their real name, and they requested I join their team for the last 6 months, which I did. I then worked on advanced human prosthetics, as it was discovered that one of our test subjects made it to the staircase to level 3. No one had gotten there before. No one had even seen it in the distance, but some Somalian asshole radioed in and asked if he should take the stairs down. I fitted 3 people with prosthetics that were reverse engineered from designs found at the end of level 2. When I was translating them to a human standard, most of their form and function was a straight function replacement to lost body parts. They served no function outside of giving the giants their reinforced limbs back, so it wasn't a very difficult thing to do. This may include a diplomat, but I can't go into it. One more continued. So this is actually my department, and something I'm going to go into with a little bit more detail. This all occurs over a 6-month period, so I'll try and break it down as best as I remember. 6 months. I'm recruited by the biology team for classified work. When I am fully vetted and integrated to the team, they show me the photos and rough translations of their text with the prosthetics that were made. I read all of this and studied it for roughly a month before coming back to them with my assessment. T-5 months. I submitted my research to the team and told them that the prosthetics in these photos and its adjoining text didn't do anything for the giants except give them the use of their limbs back. I also provided a written up guide on how I could translate this into a human standard and fit it onto people with time, money, and subjects. They immediately walked me to my lab. 5 months to 3 months I spent creating the limbs, vetting them, and then attaching the alpha product to the 2 individuals that were provided. They could exert 4 times the force of a regular human with this limb and absorb all kinetics. 1 leg, 1 arm. The guy with the leg was put on a cardio circuit and his limb was purposefully underpowered. The design I submitted was for an installed power source, but the team required it to be wired in the event that shit went sideways. They also had me design a full set of arms and legs for robotic testing, which they did without me. 3 to 0 months. I fitted a diplomat with a new pair of legs with the power source installed, but throttled down to less than 25% output for the sake of appearances. They then had me turn over all my work, sign my "no, this is ours" form, and then gave me heaps of money for the pleasure. I ran out of space again. I'll sum this up, respond to folks, and then I'm going to fuck off for a while. We're not done yet, boys. I found a second pyramid, even closer to the base camp. No details. What is the power source? What material are they made of? Did they find any more artifacts? Any tombs? Who is the diplomat? During the last few months, the other 2 subjects fully integrated the limb. I assume the third did as well, but he left because he is a special lad. This wasn't in my designs or part of my intent, but their brains were able to map the prosthetic. The one with the new leg, I submitted to a reflex and poke test when he claimed he could feel it. He would flinch, react, and do everything someone would do with a fully functioning limb, except for bleed. I put him behind a curtain once, with his leg through, and dug a scalpel into the sole of his foot. He howled. This was about the time that I was feeling really hopeful that I could realize this dream of seamless prosthetics and was in contact with the organization and school after my rotation ended. Never heard back. I've reproduced what I designed there, but if I submit it to the public, I'm sure they'd take me out or something. Most days I'd just get drunk or travel. I personally saw a few sarcophaguses and some bones. Most organic material had rotted away, but we saw some armor and weapons, Nothing outside of human understanding. Spears, swords, shields. Artifacts were another department, but there was once a full lockdown when someone got spritzed with something in the pyramid and ran out of it, reacting violently. That's when those bulkhead doors swung down. 72 hours. There are traps, biological agents, and some sort of mold along the grooves of the floor set into the stone. Drones are the safest bet, but some have been blasted with acid or contaminated in some capacity. Humans go in intermittently, but any breach of their suit means they're responded to once they exit. Next week, but it's Pathfinder, so I'm not super jazzed about it. The information I'm drawing is mostly from my own perspective and interpretation from my medical courses at the organization. The only crisp, clear, and visual items I received were the diagrams of the prosthetics and the translation. Sorry, doubling back. So the power source was mentioned on the walls, but the text is shit. Whenever I can't fill the hole of knowledge with the wall diagrams, I assume it's in the text somewhere, and that I'm properly fucked, and it's time to move on. Using the leg as my point of reference, there's a casing on the back of the calf that houses a small, relatively, sphere. It basically clicks in when you push it into place, assumption from the wall. The drawing of the orb was made with an excruciating amount of detail to describe its color and inlaid markings. There's a pattern across the front, similar to a downwards crown. It circles the top of the sphere and has 3 points going towards the middle of it. The inlay is made out of a different material than the rest of the sphere. I could not crack it, and the teams had no idea, so I developed around it and made it a rechargeable battery housing. With the resources I had, it would hold for about 28 days before dropping in performance, and then have diminishing returns until recharged. The recharge method was used the same way the team made me design a wired-in unit. It ran to a local power jack, giving you enough slack to function, but mounted into the back of the calf. First level, knowledge. Second level, religion and prosthetics, evidently. Third, fourth, and fifth, don't know. Entirely mechanical. There's a synthetic metal weave that we had to access that I could reinforce when I connected my computers to the leg. How is the person able to feel pain when you cut it if it was made entirely of mechanical parts? Did it have microchips? So, giants made this gigantic monument dedicated to preserving their knowledge, but booby-trapped it in case someone wanted to access the knowledge. Makes no sense. Anyway, how do these limbs work? Do they use biological muscles, or is it all mechanical? If biological, how do you grow the tissue? I'm back, and we'll retread some shit I missed. I wish I fucking knew. They kept my research, my notes, and I was cycled out before I could continue my investigation. It synchronized with his body somehow, because when we checked the brainwaves, he could register the limb in its entirety and deploy fine movement controls to it. Most prosthetics these days can't rotate or flex individual toes without a massive amount of extra gear and input from the user. Even the most promising shit I've ever seen has limited synaptic response to individual pieces. When this individual used the leg, he could stretch his arch, curl his toes, the big one by itself, the smaller ones as a group, and rotate his ankle as if stretching it out. He could also engage and disengage the calf like a natural muscle. I don't know what changed there, and it still keeps me up at night when I think about it. Somehow, his body integrated the leg, and there is nothing special about it. I didn't add anything new or different. I didn't even make it out of the same materials found on Antarctica, mostly because I could not. We x-rayed him. We checked literally everything. There's no nerve connections in the foot. Nothing simulated with microchips or anything. It's literally a power prosthetic meant to simulate basic walking functionality and reinforced limb strength. The fact that it does so much more upsets me because I cannot get my head around it. It's one of the reasons I drink, to be honest. Skip the start of your thing. I honestly have no idea why it is trapped and triggered. Some of the items that go off are recoverable, but if they gleaned something from it, it was kept from me. The armor is antiquated, but somehow preserved. No rust or wear outside of actual combat. They had scars to them, impacts from weapons, dents, etc. The biological agents were kept from me as well. I was specifically placed in my lab for the prosthetic work. I got 20 minutes. I'll hit a few more. I recall most of the conversation, but not verbatim. The fact that they recruited me because of my prosthetic robotic background makes me think they know or knew more about things before I came on board. Why would they recruit me out of the door and put me on robotics and then discover the prosthetics in the pyramid? That doesn't add up for me either, and also is a reason I drink. They brought me on for years and gave me 6 months of actual content and then shafted me. I could reproduce the conversation, and did for the most part, but it sounds really clunky and weird without context. Basically, we went to the installation bar after and discussed what I'd been doing and how this came up. He told me my contact at the organization pulled some strings to get me there in the first place, and then did it again to put me on this project. The guy who made it to the 3rd level was killed at the staircase. I don't know how, but I watched the video feed afterwards and saw the shaky video feed of him trudging forward. He got a good few shots of the wall, hence my project, but was hysterical and not listening to the directions. He stopped at the stairs, asked if he should proceed, and when told to keep going, the feed dropped, and so did his vitals. No clue what happened to the poor fucker. The other subjects were much more useful to the actual initiative, but I won't talk about them in too much depth. On a shit laptop trackpad right now, but I can bust out some of the language and the orb itself after I get back, a couple hours from now. I'll think about reproducing the prosthetic, but only because it will be done on my laptop's trackpad and while I'm drunk, so it will be slightly off the regular model. The reason for this is that I have a specific way I design and sketch that can connect the dots for people and change this thread from LARPer rants for hours about fake shit to man found shot in the back of the head 13 times, ruled a suicide. I'm going to let this one go because I think I overreacted, but it was an ambassador, and that is all I will say on the matter. 6 in one hand, half dozen in the other. It's for the betterment of mankind, I guess. But at the same time, the drones roll over a lot of human remains to get to the next chunk of wall. Will it change things? Maybe, but probably not for the average person. It's being suppressed for the masses, really. When you tell the entire world that there was, is, might have been, a continent of giants that fashioned all this hyper-advanced technology that we can't scientifically explain, well, folks tend to lose their shit, and the fact that we can attest for all the goings-on and contaminants. I didn't go into a lot of detail on the drones, but these are next-level urban warfare devices meant to tank a car bomb. The fact that an acid can eat through its shell and keep going is phenomenal. Then again, they are meant to absorb and displace kinetics, not whatever the fuck got on it. Don't recognize it, but they are meticulous with their security changes. If you wanted me to venture a guess, 000 times 038 is a cell within the installation, defense likely, and the part after is a login name. The next thing I'd look up is the name for Herté 6439, but I won't bother with Google. The rest of it seems like nonsense, except for the terminal exit. Looks like he broke his code with a quick disconnect from an on-site machine. I'm going to look into this when I get back, just because of him dropping the name Gore. I'm out. If the thread is still around, I'll pop back in and give myself a name or something. Until then, go ahead and drop questions or observations, and I'll get back to it. I'm in the taxi for a bit, but I can touch on a few of these. There is a repeating letter pattern that appears when referring to the giants in armor and weapons. I'll draw it when I come back, but it resembles GAB, except the G is drawn with sharp, slanted lines. The A is just a triangle, and the B is an approximation because it looks like a sideways 8 with struts, if that makes sense. The assumption between me and the boys was that it referred to the warrior caste, so we'd call them gabbers when they were seen during decryption. As for this, I think it references the Earth's neural web, but there's a lot of shit about Atlantis and Lemuria in here, and that's far away and aside from my wheelhouse. If it did or does exist, I was not informed of it. Most people should be familiar with the neural web, the idea that all consciousness is tethered and if we were a better species, we could operate at a higher level. That's all I know about it, however. I've seen pictures of the continent on the wall, with grid lines on it, but we chalk this up to map making in quadrants. The rest is gleaned from X. Ever heard of the phantom limb syndrome? The phantom limb integrated with the prosthetic limb. If you remove the prosthetic, it would disengage from the brain. Put it back, and it would re-engage, I imagine. That was my first idea too, but the reading was different. When a phantom limb occurs, it's because of other regions in your brain picking up this sudden dead spot of neurons and adopting them, layman's. But he had complete mapping in his brain for the fake leg. He would step on a rock with a metal leg. We were developing a synthetic skin for it later, at the ambassador's request, but my rotation ended, and Wince stubbed his toe, shit like that, and we would see a response. I wanted to test it with more subjects and map them before installation and after, but the diplomat fucked me. It has to be something about being so close to the pyramid at the time of surgery. It has to stimulate neuroplasticity, because nothing in my design or in the resulting surgery would indicate to me a deviation. It infuriates me because I think about it daily. It happened all 3 times. Nope, but I'll do it in paint. That way I have plausible deniability, and no one can analyze my handwriting or sketches. That aside. Quick notes. The green lines on the letters are the way the letter is written. This was discerned by analysis on the wall patterns, not done by me. I just figured it was a good addition. I won't draw the rest, since I think the redesign from the Antarcticans is owned by some prick in the government, but the prosthetic was made with new age technology. The metal on the leg itself slightly pinches the skin. Couldn't make it 100% flush, but the skin and the muscle within the housing are regularly cleaned and sanitized by the machine itself. Some of the muscles in the leg are reconnected to the appliance, installed in 3 parts. The adapter on the left, the knee, and then the rest of the leg, while others were poorly retethered upon the first surgery. Removal of the leg not done by my team, and were replaced with the synthetic muscle weave I mentioned before. I expected to tell him that he wouldn't have full mobility back because of this, but it mapped not only the leg, but the human-made synthetics. Full muscular control. I was about to go off on you, but realized my mistake. So when I first mentioned drones, before going into the ones inside the pyramid, I meant the aerial kind, the remote-operated kind that we used to bomb terrorists and kids over in the Middle East. My bad. The traffic we got out here is usually from C-17s. In fact, I believe most of our shit is provided that way. Have you any idea how old the place is? Are the stories about the Nazis having a base down there true? And weird UFO alien shit? Thanks, Anon. Over 14,000 years old. I've only worked with the pyramid and the base, so I've never been down there. I think you may be thinking about Hollow Earth and Agartha or whatever the fuck its name is this week. As for the UFO shit, no dice. They were aware of birds, but never concerned themselves with flight. The only representation that I saw was a predatory bird used for hunting, depicted sitting on a giant's bare arm, talons dug in, but nothing portrayed on the face of either the giant or the bird. Unclear if it was done for artistic design or otherwise, but the implication is that they trained them. The truth, hopefully. Some understanding of what we were or had been, what came before, what the species is capable of. Whatever the fuck we can do to combat tomorrow and our own extinction. If these people all faded away with how substantial and strong they were, well, we're 1/4 at best what they were in terms of everything. What can we do? It's also a bit spirit-breaking to realize that every great human accomplishment has been done before. That's what I reflect on the most when I'm drunk or lamenting. When I was growing up, my grandpa had an old fake leg and a cane. He was constantly in discomfort, and I always tried to build him new ones out of Legos or necks or whatever shit I had. I'd doodle them. I'd try to make better ones with rockets on them and shit. He'd grin, pat me, and tell me that one day I'd help a lot of people like him live without pain. And I want to. I did, if you believe all this shit. But I just used the notes from people who did it better 14,000 years ago. and they took it all away from me. I can't get my hands on the actual technology to facilitate change for people, and I can't leak these documents, or my family might be hushed. I'm back to making shit out of Legos while all the big boy toys are elsewhere. I tangented, but to get back to what I really think will be found. After the cataclysm was, they went back into medical science. I think the science that they left at the end of the second level and going further is the salvation of the human race. I think these pyramids do something when coupled with this technology, and I think that's the only way we survive when we hit our pinnacle. I theorized before that I think they may interfere with the normal biological process to propagate their species. I think they start out as humans, and something in the pyramid or the pyramid itself causes the change. I'm here for 30, and then we'll be permanently dropping the thread, but wanted to talk about this. Most of you are probably familiar with burying the lead, but if you're not, you'll get it in a second. Cliff High is also very prominent in cryptocurrency, and I want you to consider this as well. When Cliff speaks about this, he uses buzzwords to simulate a reaction from his audience. Read, Nibiru, Planet X, Cataclysms, oh my. This helps to propagate a narrative with a specific audience to detract from the actual story. This is using the conspiracy theory audience to help hide the real comings and goings of the US government and whatever world organization you choose to believe in. They all report to the same council. It's why you can link smatterings of points from these videos to my recollection. They associate the truth with the rest of this video, and it becomes nonsense in association. I don't mean to shit on anyone that believes in Planet X. I believe in a ridiculous amount of shit myself and can't provide evidence outside of my story. At my best, I am a very good liar. To wrap this up, I am aware of Cliff High. I can venture a guess and likely be correct unless she was fired as to who sends his checks. It's hard to figure out what's really going on because the truth is buried around the lies. Hell, this may be a lie. Can't trust anyone now, can you? But keep this in mind when you go out and read over conspiracy theories. Listen to all of it, to the entire explanation, and then listen to the short-term pieces that get peppered in that seem to fit, but fit awkwardly. The puzzle piece that sits a bit weird compared to the rest of the picture.